From Chicago, it's another big hour where Chicago comes to talk on the Big 89. WLS.
Political Shootout time, 591-8900. My name is Tom Roeser. And if you want to know what I really think, it's www.tomroeser.com or go to the Chicago Daily Observer, www.cdobs.com. And with me is
Bob Dold.
He is Republican candidate for Congress running in the 10th District of Illinois, one of them. And next to him sits
Jeff Berkowitz, host and producer of Public Affairs, airing every Monday night throughout the city of Chicago at 8:30 p.m. on cable channel 21. You can find all of our shows on YouTube. That's youtube.com/user/Public Affairs TV.
Okay, this is the first appearance on the show for Robert Dold, a Republican candidate for Congress, running in the 10th. 10th is the North Shore District, starting at the lakefront in Wilmette, running north all the way to the city of Waukegan, almost to the Wisconsin border, goes inland. Northbrook, Deerfield, includes further inland suburbs, Arlington Heights and Wheeling. To the north is Libertyville. This establishment Republican district voted Democratic for president in recent years, narrowly for Al Gore in 2000 by a slightly larger margin for John Kerry 2004, and 61% for Barack Obama in 2008, but it's clung to Republican congressional representation since 1980 with John Edward Porter. Then Mark Kirk was running for the U.S. Senate. Bob Dold, 40, of Kenilworth, runs a pest control company, the oldest one in the United States, born on Evanston, reared in Winnetka, graduate from New Trier, B.A. from Denison University, intellectual home of Rokon. John Canning and Madison partners, the actor Hal Holbrook and Michael Eisner, former CEO of Disney, and who else did I say?
Senator Dick Lugar is also a great alum from Denison University.
Bob Dold has a law degree from Indiana University, where he gave the commencement speech, an MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg School, has been a Scoutmaster, same troop where he became an Eagle Scout, has been long involved in Republican activities, worked in the presidential campaigns, served as an investigative counsel for the House Government Reform Committee, married to Danielle for 10 years. The couple is parents of 3 children. The family attends Kenilworth Union Church. And welcome to the program, Bob Dold.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it.
You're the establishment candidate for the nomination, the Republican who's raised the most money and has won the most endorsements from the townships. Supposedly, the leader in your race, the one with the most name identification at least, is Beth Colson of Glenview. She's not just liberal, she's on the far edge of the Republican Party, having declined to endorse George W. Bush in 2004. Tell me that you're not as liberal as she.
I am certainly not as liberal as she, Tom. I can tell you that when I got my start and got my passion in politics, it was when Ronald Reagan was in the White House, and I firmly stand for smaller government, lower taxes, personal responsibility, which I think is all but gone in our society today, and for a strong national defense.
Okay, Jeff, you have a comment. You're from that district.
So, I do live in the 10th Congressional District, right, and have for quite a while.
Beth Colson, let's talk about her, although she isn't here. I'm going to invite her on the show, but is she the front runner or not?
No, I actually think that Bob Dold is the front runner, because if you look at, I haven't seen any polls, so I don't know what they would say, and maybe Bob can enlighten us if he's done, some internal polling. But if you look at people who've raised money, I think Bob is right up there. I think maybe Green has combined with what he's put in and raised, he may be ahead, but I think Bob is second. On township endorsements, I think Bob is first, with 3 endorsements from the townships. I've seen Bob speak at forums. He's a good speaker. He's polished. He knows how to take the mic.
He has a very good commercial.
He has a good commercial. So,
Fox.
Look, when you do that whole spectrum of things, where he is, what the positions are for the Republican primary in the 10th, I think Dole's the front runner at this point.
Let me ask you, Jeff, as a longtime resident of the 10th, would you guess that it, as many other suburban districts are, is going to the right now after a year of Obama, rising deficits and the strong possibility of tax hikes? Does this guy fill the profile?
Well, I think it's still a Democratic district. It was in 2004. It went 53-47 for John Kerry. And it went, I believe, for Al Gore prior to that.
51% for Gore, that's right.
What was the percentage for Obama? 61%?
61%.
I just read it here. That shows you're sound asleep.
Well, it sounded familiar, and I just couldn't remember if I just heard it. No, so I think it's still a Democratic district.
Yeah, for president, but since 1980, it's had Republican moderate Republican congressman.
Well, they've been in the mode of John Porter and then Mark Kirk. They are social liberals, fiscal conservatives, or that's how they bill themselves. I don't know if Bob Dold is as socially liberal as
I'm going to find out, so
as,
don't ask him.
As Kirk and Beth Coulson.
Okay. Now we go to Bob Dold.
And John Porter, sorry.
Well, I mean, I think, honestly, with regard to that question...
Wait a minute. I'm going to ask you the question.
Okay. I was going to comment on his, but that's
What
all right.
are your feelings on social issues? I'm going to ask you for brief comments one at a time. Are you pro-life or pro-choice?
I am against partial birth abortion. I am against federal funding. I am for parental notification. I do not believe that Roe versus Wade should be overturned.
Okay. Pro-gay marriage or not?
I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. I think that same-sex partners should have some rights, like hospital visitation and the like.
Social vouchers or not? I'm sorry, school vouchers or not?
I think we need to do something with regard to education, and certainly choice would be one of the things that I think we would be in favor of.
Pro-Second Amendment totally to the extent of supporting concealed carry or not?
I am pro-Second Amendment. I think the law in Illinois right now with regard to concealed carry is probably pretty good. I would not. I agree with the Heller decision with the Supreme Court in terms of the ability to have to keep and bear arms. I think that will weigh heavily with regard to the Chicago and the McDonald decision coming up.
Jeff, comment on those answers.
Well, Bob, do you know, on the issue of abortion, do you know that you are more conservative than Beth Coulson?
Do I know if I
Yeah, because, I mean, I think she may be for parental notice. I don't know. She may be against federal funding. What was the other one you mentioned? Partial birth abortion. She may be against that. I don't know. We haven't had her on the show. We haven't talked to her lately. So is it your view that you are more conservative on those three issues, those three aspects of abortion?
I believe I am. Certainly.
What's the question?
I'm just saying,
am I more conservative than Beth Coulson on some of those
I hope
social?
so.
And the answer, I believe, is yes.
I don't know.
I mean,
maybe Beth will call in and tell us that she's not for parental notice. She
is for partial birth abortion, however.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
she is.
What do you mean? She's not in favor of having partial birth abortions. You mean she's against a ban, the congressional ban on partial birth abortions?
Right.
But I don't know that Bob Dold would say that he would have supported that because, as you know, Tom, that ban did not include an exception for the health of the mother.
I understand.
Ask Mr. Dold right now if he would have voted for that.
State your position again on partial birth abortion.
I'm against partial birth abortion.
Okay.
Does that mean you would have? But Bob, I asked you this before. I think. Does that mean you would have voted if you were in Congress when the legislation came up to ban partial birth abortion, and it did not have an exception for the health of the mother, to allow that?
Health of the mother is designed by Planned Parenthood to say anything from stretch marks goes as health of the mother. But
listen to the answer,
okay,
because I've asked Bob Dold before, and at that time he said he would have to read the legislation. That is, so would you have voted to support the ban on partial birth abortion, that specific legislation, which does not have an exception for the health of the mother?
Honestly, Jeff, I'd go back to say I'd like to see what the actual legislation would read. I'm against partial birth abortion. I want to make sure that I'm clear on that so that you hear it plainly here as we're talking face to face.
But Tom,
we got to move on. Okay, go ahead.
I don't know that that's any
one question, his answer, and we go.
No, but I don't know that that's any more conservative than what we would hear from Beth Coulson. I'm trying to be fair here, and I don't know that it is. Maybe Beth will call in and tell us which it is.
Well, I hope Beth calls in because I've seen her with all the listings, and she's for partial birth abortion. She's against the ban for partial birth abortion.
But he has not said he's in favor of the ban. I just asked him that now.
Give us again, one more time.
I asked him, would he vote vote in favor of the legislation that bans partial birth abortion, even though it doesn't have an exception for the health of the mother?
Go ahead.
I would. Again, I said before that I have not read the legislation with regard to the specific
you
put up there.
With,
so my things, as I said before and have said all along, I'm against partial birth abortion. I'm against any form of federal funding. I am for parental notification. And I do not believe that Roe v. Wade should be overturned.
Okay,
let's answer the question.
Let's go to another one. We can't just 1 hour of colloquy.
Yes, sir.
Counselor.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Jeff Berkowitz.
Yes,
recently, Bill Daley, brother of the mayor, wrote an op-ed that said the Democratic Party runs the risk of becoming too liberal and thus losing independents and moderates. Would you say the Democratic candidates for the 10th fall into that category? They are Julie Amos, Dan Seals, Elliot Richardson.
No, I mean, I don't know that Bill Daley would be upset with Dan Seals and Julie Hamos as Democratic candidates in the 10th Congressional District. He may be talking about other things that Obama's supporting or not supporting, but in regard to the positions that those two have taken, I don't think he thinks they're out of the mainstream of the Democratic Party.
Okay, do you?
Do I think that Julie Hamos and Dan Seals?
Yes. Do you think they're out of the mainstream?
Not of the mainstream of the Democratic Party.
Okay, let's go to you.
Yeah, I believe that.
I'm talking about the mainstream of the country.
The mainstream of the
Bill Daley said that the worry that he has is the Democratic Party is going to be out of the mainstream of the country.
Okay.
And I'm asking him whether he thinks.
I've had an opportunity to be at forums with both Julie Hamos and Dan Seals and Elliot Richardson, for that matter, and I've heard them talk, and I can tell you that I'm amazed at how much they are coming to the right with regard to fiscal discipline. It appears that is amazing. Now, having said that, I believe Julie Hamos is talking about how she wants to get to Washington to further and the work that's already been begun by President Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Harry Reid. I think that is outside of the mainstream of the party, potentially.
Okay, Bob Dold. Now your feelings on economic issues. Again, brief comments one at a time. Where do you come down on the $787 billion stimulus, effective or ineffective?
I think that's been largely proven to be ineffective. The $787 billion stimulus package designed to get workers back to work. We've got an unemployment rate that's risen well past 8%. Honestly, it's amazing to me. 2/3 of all jobs in our country are created by small business. I think that's a well-documented fact. In fact, we've heard it's higher than that.
Next
and
question.
only 1%, Tom, has been out of that $787 billion was geared towards small business.
Next question. Cap and trade, which Mark Kirk supported in the House.
I believe it was bad legislation. I certainly would have voted against it. I think it's a job killer. I think it's taken jobs away not only from the folks of Illinois but out of the country, and would be a bad bill and certainly bad for global economic.
The Wall Street bailouts.
This is where I would have differed. I would have supported the TARP bailout. And the reason I would have, any type of a bailout that you're talking about can become catastrophic and needs to have a very high barrier in terms of what we're doing on that. I believe that we were looking at something that could have been the likes of the Great Depression and an economic Armageddon.
Sounds like country club Nutrier to me, but I
no. And here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, Tom. I think
Nutrier doesn't have a country club. I don't think, but there are a few in Nutrier
Okay,
Township.
go ahead. Comment on the questions.
But if I may finish, Tom, because
yes.
this is the critical part. I believe that was basically shored up by March. Okay, what couldn't have happened is the fact that it was now then determined that we were going to use this as a slush fund for auto bailouts and everything else. That should not have been the case. All those monies should have been put back to pay back the deficit.
Okay, we're going to have Jeff comment on those answers and probably ask them himself after this. And we're back. Jeff Berkowitz comment on the candidates' comments on the economy.
Well, I think the bailout response is interesting, and Bob and I had a phone conversation. We haven't been able to get Bob on my show, as we can't get Colson on the show, and maybe Bob will say he'll do it soon. But in any case, when we spoke about it, I was confused on the answer because I hadn't got a clear yes or no. It sounds like you've said now you would have voted yes in support of the bailouts if you had been there in the fall of 2008. The financial sector $700 billion bailout.
That's correct.
And I don't know, but Dick Green, it sounds like, I haven't had him on the show, but it sounds like he would have voted against the bailouts. Have you heard that?
I don't know where Dick stands on that one, to be honest.
And we don't know what Beth would say, but I think that's an important issue. And I think Ari Friedman has been on my I know he's been on my show, and I think he said that he would have voted against the bailouts. So there is some
he did. He would,
because he said this here. And so there's some differences between Green and Friedman and Dold, if you want to think of them as the more conservatives.
I would say Dold is more of an establishment candidate from the standpoint of, and I'm not knocking it. If I came from Kenilworth, I'd feel the same way. Is that a knock?
I'll take it for what it is, Tom.
Tom, you're a Minnesota Republican, so that's different.
Frank and Carol Stream, you're on with Tom Roeser at WLS.
Tom, we love the show. How you doing tonight, guys?
Thank you.
Guys, I want to thank you. I got chuckling out loud listening to the ping-ponging back and forth relative to who's more conservative, or are they conservative?
Yeah, well, we know what we said. Why don't you ask a question now?
What the American people want to know: are you really going to stand by what you say after you ask for a hot tub or a hospital in your name? We keep getting sold out, and you say campaigning doesn't equate to what happens after you get in the White House. That's for both
on
parties.
What issue are you talking? Abortion?
Abortion. It could be the war.
So you're asking, are you going to stick to what you say during the campaign?
Absolutely. I believe your integrity determines your identity. You got to stick with what you say.
Go ahead, Frank.
Well, as a tax-paying American who's 45 years old, I've seen Democrats and Republicans ruin this country, and I don't. You'd be the first one to keep your word, sir. So don't be surprised if I'm not shocked, and the majority of Americans don't believe you either.
Well, Frank, honestly, I appreciate the call, and I can tell you that we're seeing that kind of anger out there amongst the voters all across the district, and you're certainly not alone.
Here's Chris in Wheeling. You're on with Tom Roeser to Villas.
Yes, Mr. Dole, I'm in your district, by the way. I have a question. What is your opinion about repealing Glass-Steagall? Or not repealing it, but reinstating Glass-Steagall. And do you believe, as I do, that the Wall Street banks should be, tightly controlled? And the reason we faced the disaster we did in the last year is because of the repeal of Glass-Steagall and allowing these criminal bankers just to go crazy.
Well, there's no question that we need to have more regulation in terms of taking a look at what's going on with the banks. And if we look at the financial institutions and what went on, we saw a number of things that went on. First of all, the uptick rule was gone. Naked short selling wasn't being enforced with regard to Wall Street. Those are things that I think the SEC, clearly has laws on the books that were not being enforced. And so we have to enforce the laws that we have first. And once we started doing that, we saw, if you look at the graphs with regard to Wall Street, we saw a big uptick as soon as those things were put back into place. So there's no question we need some regulation.
One more question, Jeff.
The caller mentions Glass-Steagall being repealed, and the caller thinks that was harmful to the economy. Do you agree?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know the sheer effect of that in terms of the overall economy.
Jeff Berkowitz.
Yes, sir.
Barack Obama gave himself a B+ in rating. How do you rate him?
I'd say a B to a B-. I mean, in fairness, it appears he's going to pass the health care reform, which he thinks is very important. He's kept his Democratic majority in the Senate in tow, so he could do that, and in the House. But on foreign policy, he's not advanced the ball at all with respect to Iran. I don't know that he's yet...
So you're saying B?
Yeah, so B. He's done some things that he would think, and the Democratic Party and people who are believers in that think is good. But on foreign policy, I'd say less well.
Bob?
It would certainly not be anywhere higher than a C. I think that if we look at, from my perspective and from those that I speak with, we're talking about a government takeover of our healthcare system, 1/6 of our economy. I think it's in my opinion, very bad policy, and I'll agree with Jeff with regard to Iran and foreign policy. We are marching down a path that is not a strong one, and we're going to find ourselves in some problems with regard to Iran. We need to talk about sanctions in Iran. We need to talk about sanctions immediately. Israel certainly is in jeopardy, in my opinion.
We have John on the northwest side. You're on with Tom Roeser de Villas.
Yes, thank you. The reason I'm calling in America, I may be exaggerating the point, but I believe it's $1 trillion drug trade in cocaine, marijuana, and heroin, so that the FARC in Colombia is getting $30 to $50 billion in funding from
Okay, what's your question? What's your question?
Well, when you talk about personal responsibility, why don't we allow Americans to decide how personally responsible they should be for drugs instead of having the laws that are funding all of the terrorist groups throughout the world?
Okay, question.
Well, I don't believe, if you're talking about legalizing the drug trade, certainly that's not something I'm for.
Okay, let us go to...
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Well, Bob, there are a lot of arguments from conservatives like now deceased Milton Friedman, who would say if you legalize drugs, you would take away the risk premium. They're virtually costless to produce. So you wouldn't have any pushers because there's no incentive to push if something's legal and no great gain. Do you buy into that argument? I mean, Milton Friedman was a pretty well-respected economist. He was very well-respected. And if he says legalization may be a good idea, do you think perhaps you would reconsider?
Well, first of all, great respect for Milton Friedman, and I certainly think that he is a superb thinker. The thing that I think is, from an economic standpoint, that may have a point. I think from a social standpoint, in terms of drugs, how pervasive they can be and the effects that they can have, very, very bad. So, in my opinion, that would be a very bad policy.
Okay, before you comment, back after this.
89 WLS.
We resolve to bring the stories that matter to you and give you the place to talk about them, too. Happy New Year from the Big 89 WLS.
Jeff Berkowitz, comment on the candidate's response in terms of drug matters.
Well, I'm just saying, I think Bob said about something about the social consequences. I mean, Milton Friedman would say the social consequences would be, if you legalize it, you'll have fewer negative social consequences because you don't have, when you make something legal, the price falls, people can consume it at a low price. There's not a great incentive for illegal producers to be in the business, and there's not a great incentive to get people hooked on things. You're not going to make a lot of money on that. So although you have some people who will abuse and self-indulge as they do with liquor, you might have the same thing with illegal drugs.
Yeah, the answer isn't that he has to square with Milton Friedman. I don't think we have to do that.
Tom,
I'd like you to critique.
That's actually important. If you can't square something with Milton Friedman, it's not right. I'm just kidding.
Baloney. Milton
Actually,
Friedman
true, but
was wrong on the economy with his monetarism.
He was not wrong on the economy.
He was.
You can't blame anything that happened on Milton Friedman. We could do a whole show on
Schwartz
that.
were wrong on it. But listen,
they were absolutely right. Don't ever say anything negative about Milton Friedman.
Absolutely, just like everybody else. I want to find out, do you favor... It sounds squishy to me. Why don't you tell me again where you are? You sound squishy tonight.
Squishy on what, the drugs?
Yeah.
No, absolutely. They should not be legalized.
You're squishy on a lot of things.
No.
But
we should not be legalizing drugs. Firm stance, no chance.
But Bob,
okay, don't have him berate you. He's supposed to question you.
Yeah, well, Bob, just tell me. We've had this war on drugs for, the last 50 years, 100 years? It's not working out. It's not getting better.
We've had a war on prostitution for longer than that. It isn't working out either.
No, it's working out fine. I don't know. There's no great problem with prostitution here. Not that I know of, Tom. Maybe you're more acquainted with this. All right.
You can run for Congress.
No, I'm just saying that I think he should deal with that issue. Anybody, not just Bob.
He said he just doesn't have to agree with you.
No, but just tell us why, if in the last 100 years it's not getting better.
It's
why
a
do you
moral
think
issue.
Why would you keep doing something that doesn't get better?
It's a moral issue, and forget Friedman.
It's a moral issue? He said it was a social consequences issue. The social consequences are terrible.
Milton Friedman is... go ahead.
Tom, I can't believe you're being negative on that.
State it again.
I don't believe that drugs should be legalized.
All right.
Period.
Here we go. 591-8900. Let us go to... let's see. Mark on the north side. You're on with Tom Roeser, WLS.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. I have a question. In light of the recent activity of the Tea Party people in the last 6 months, and some of the activities that they've been engaging in, which for the most part I support as a Republican, should that progress to the point that they want to form a party either on a local level or for congressional races or even on a national level, how do you think that's going to affect Republican opportunities in 2010.
Let me ask you this before he answers the question so I get it straight. Are you talking about people who are disaffected with the Republican Party and want to start a third party? Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about people on the left who are fed up with Obama and want to start another party?
No, because I feel in the end that the people on the left are going to come back into the fold.
Okay. You're talking about people on the right, right?
I'm talking about the people on the right that for the most part, are very disaffected with Republican candidates. I may be to some extent, but I realize in the end, if there's any chance for Republicans to make significant gains in 2010, forming a third party that's basically is a conservative...
Well, I haven't heard that that's a very serious thing to form a third party right now.
Well...
I mean, that's going to take a long time, but comment on it.
I think the formation of a third party will certainly do, in the Tea Party, the Republican Party, damage. At least the Republican Party candidates, I think, would be damaged by a third party
Bob
as we split
Dold,
votes.
on Christmas Day, a 23-year-old Muslim fanatic rich kid with no passport, no baggage, paying cash, got on an airplane for Detroit with an explosive in his underwear and a syringe full of deadly acid. Despite the fact his father reported him as a danger to the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria, the kid's visa renewal had been canceled by the Brits. He studied Arabic in Yemen, headquarters of the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, tried to detonate his bomb in the air in order to slaughter Christians on their holiday before being restrained by his fellow passengers. He made it onto the one watch list, not the no-fly list. Napolitano says it proves the system worked. My question to you, should she be canned?
To answer your question directly, I don't think she should be canned. Secretary Chertoff today said that he has utmost confidence in Napolitano. I am concerned by her comments that she said the system worked when it clearly did not work. You tell that to the people on the plane. It did not work.
Yeah, I think she should have been canned yesterday. She has no expertise, no qualifications for this position.
You believe she should be?
Yeah, not just because of that statement. She has since said, as Bob said, that I meant that applies to anything forward.
You think she should be canned?
Yeah, she does not have the expertise to be Homeland Security.
Yes or no?
Yes. I think she should be canned. She should have never had that position. If somebody, I think Republicans should have, really questioned her closely when she came up. Maybe they did. I didn't see it for confirmation. She doesn't have the experience, the expertise. She doesn't know a damn thing about the position.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Berkowitz. Following up on the Christian Day terrorist event, the President of the United States didn't address the American people on this matter for 3 full days while he remained on his Hawaii vacation. And when he did, his language was full of legal niceties such as the attempted terrorist attack and the terrorist, quote, allegedly tried to ignite an explosive device on his body, setting off a fire. Was Obama's response the kind of reaction you think Americans deserved after an episode like this?
No, he should have cut his vacation short. The media, if it had happened with Bush, they would have been all over why he's in Crawford, why he's staying in Crawford. They give Obama a pass. He should have cut his vacation short. He should have aggressively come out and said this thing was bungled from the beginning, and he's going to look at it and make sure it gets turned around. He should not have referred to it as a lone violent extremist. My gosh, this guy was all but tied to Al-Qaeda from the beginning, and I think Janet Napolitano again came out and said something initially. There doesn't seem to be any indication this is related to Al-Qaeda.
Bob Dold.
Barack Obama is losing the enormous popularity he had because he is making statements that simply don't square with the common sense of the American public.
Bob Dold.
Barack Obama should have come out strongly on this thing the day it happened, and it's clearly come out, and it's been an Al-Qaeda attack. It's not an alleged attack or an attempted attack. It was an attack, and he needed to come out strongly and cut his vacation short.
Bob Dold. Attorney General Eric Holder has ordered the notorious Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the 9/11 terrorist, to stand trial in a civilian court only a few blocks away from Ground Zero, a trial which enabled him to use all the rights that accrue to American citizens, including the opportunity to address the world as if he were a political prisoner. Do you agree with this procedure, or do you think he should have been required to be tried in a military court?
I would have tried him in a military court, should not be given the bully pulpit to talk about it. Plain and simple.
All right. Follow up, and then we're going to Berkowitz. Do you support return of waterboarding?
I do not support the return of waterboarding for the very reason my uncle spent 8 years and a day in Vietnam, was tortured as a POW, and I believe that the United States is above that.
Jeff Berkowitz, would you comment on these questions?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Bob. These folks should not be tried in civilian courts. So
they should not be tried.
They should not be, because they should be interrogated closely in a military court without using waterboarding. You don't have to let the person lawyer up. We've lost, as many people have pointed out, a major opportunity here with the Christmas Day bomber, because he was apparently willing to talk before anybody was doing anything. We were getting all sorts of things, news reports of what he was saying.
And now we shut up.
Yeah, because we give him a lawyer, and the first thing the lawyer says is shut up. So it's a mistake. We set up these systems under Bush. It took a long time to make them comply with the constitutional niceties, but we did military tribunals, and instead we're using the civilian courts, which are not at all attuned to deal with this. Would we have done this in World War II, had all the prisoners of war come back, and we're going to put these people on trial one by one?
Don in Lincolnshire, you're on with Tom Roeser at WLS.
This is Don Costella in
go ahead.
Township. Bob, I've got a question for you. Your potential predecessor, Mark Kirk, was a sponsor of the local law enforcement hate crimes bill and voted for it. he voted for the Employee Non-Discrimination Act, and he voted repeatedly against expansion of offshore drilling. How would you come down on those three pieces of legislation?
Okay, Don. Let me see if I get this right. Employee Non-Discrimination Act, I don't believe I would have voted with the Employee Non-Discrimination Act. Don't believe that they should be given any special rights. With regard to offshore drilling, I am in favor of offshore drilling. I think with regard to energy policy, it all has to be on the table. And give me your first one again.
The hate crimes legislation that Representative Kirk sponsored.
I think with regard to hate crimes, I think that's an interesting one and one that I think I would probably have supported. And the reason is, with regard to hate crimes, we need to make sure that we're protecting, if indeed it can be proven. I think that's the big, hard hurdle to get over.
Well, how can you possibly prove what's in someone's mind?
Well, I think we do that. I think we.
How can you square that the notions that are in that legislation with the First Amendment to the Constitution?
Well, I think that's part of the court system in terms of mens rea, what's in their mind on that, and so that's where I think we've marched down a pretty tough path, and that's got to be a high bar for us to clear.
You want to comment on that, Jeff?
I'd rather go to an unrelated topic if I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just.
But
switch.
you can't do both.
I won't. I'm going to go to an unrelated topic, and that is there are rumors that that Congressman John Porter, who held the seat for 21 years before Mark Kirk won it in 2000, will be endorsing, and he will be endorsing soon, State Rep Beth Colson. I want to comment on that myself, but first let me just ask Bob Dold, do you hear those rumors, and do you think that would have a significant impact in the 10th if Porter did endorse Colson?
I have heard those rumors, and I have had an opportunity to talk to Congressman Porter. I don't know if he actually is going to come out and endorse or not. With regard to...
You said you did have a conversation with him?
I have spoken with
Congressman Porter. And he did not
Porter.
say whether he would or not wouldn't endorse?
He did not say if indeed he was going to actually come out and endorse or not. I do believe I have, I certainly respect Congressman Porter. He's been a friend. I can tell you that, he believes and has said in the past, he doesn't believe how much, his endorsement would have an effect in the 10th.
Okay,
so
let's
go
out.
Can I just one
more?
Yes, one quick follow-up is that, as you know, Tom, you mentioned that Beth Colson was declined to endorse George Bush on my show in 2000, but also in that same interview, which was September 14, 2000. And I want to correct something that's on YouTube. When I interviewed Ari Friedman on my show, I asked about this, and I said I said 2002, but on September 14, 2000, I asked Beth Colson. I said, where Mark Kirk is the Republican candidate in the 10th and Lauren Beth Gash is the Democratic candidate, are you making an endorsement or your preference known publicly there? Beth Colson. Once again, I don't know exactly where they stand on some very important issues. This is 6 weeks from the general election, and that are important to my constituents. So I can't say that I won't, but I have not yet, as of September 14th, endorsed Mark Kirk in 2000.
That's interesting.
And she said, I feel we have very sophisticated, educated voters in her state rep district, and they usually want to make decisions for themselves. So I'm wondering, could somebody say to Beth, if Porter were going to endorse, why not persuade him not to? Because if you have very sophisticated voters, why should they listen to what Porter's going to say? And what did Porter know? Because he left this area to go to Washington in 2001.
Okay, I want to.
He knew Beth Colson for 4 years.
I want to move on to some of the other more important issues than Beth Colson.
Well, there you go.
And that is this: to Jeff Berkowitz. Do you think the recent terrorist event will cause people to re-examine the decision to send terrorist prisoners to Thompson, Illinois, and should it?
Well, I think it should raise the general concern about national security. It should raise the concern as to whether, Al-Qaeda is more active than apparently we thought. We haven't had a major terrorist incident in this country. So what's the answer? So I think people will not reconsider and change that, but I think they should give. I think people will. I think people will give more thought, and I think they should give more thought. And
should they junk Thompson?
Yeah, just let me say they should. And what they should do is Obama should reconsider and leave the detainees in Gitmo. So forget Thompson, but the important thing is leave him in Gitmo. It's working quite well in Gitmo.
I think we ought to leave him in Gitmo. We spent $200 million on Guantanamo Bay. We should leave him in Guantanamo Bay, and we should reconsider bringing him to Thompson.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Bob Dold. So far, all negotiations with Iran have failed to deter its manufacture of a bomb. If it gets any farther, should the U.S. take out its nuclear facility or let the Israelis do it?
I don't believe the United States is going to have that choice. I think Israel is going to go ahead and preemptively strike.
Well, should we let them do it? Should we not take it ourselves?
I believe that we should. I mean, certainly
we should.
We need to put.
We should take them out if anybody does.
No, I believe we need to put our sanctions down. We need to squeeze the petroleum off. We need to do everything we can in our power to make sure that Iran gets squeezed.
We're coming back to you for a comment on that.
Okay.
Back after this.
WLS. You're listening to the Big 89 WLS,
where Chicago comes to talk.
And we're back now with Jeff Berkowitz commenting on whether we ought to ourselves bomb Iran, if it comes down to the fact that they have the bomb, or hey, I have the manufacturing ability, or whether we should let the Israelis do it. Consolidate it.
Okay, yes, 2 questions. Bob Dold, you said that you would favor substantial sanctions. How long would you give sanctions to work before somebody should consider taking military action?
I think it depends on what intelligence we're getting back in terms of where Iran is in terms of creating the bomb.
Assuming they're 18 months away, how long should we allow sanctions to go before we decide something needs to be done?
I think I would wait, probably, depending on what intelligence says, probably a year, giving us 6 months to make that happen.
And if a year happens, would you then decide the United States should go ahead and take the nuclear capability out or try to do so in Iran, or should we rely on Israel to do it after that year of sanctions?
Honestly, Jeff, I don't know.
Okay, here we go to Travis and Waukegan. You're on with Tom Roeser, WLS.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Go ahead.
So healthcare is a big issue right now, obviously. Bob, shouldn't illegal immigrants be able to buy insurance like everybody else, so we're not paying for them to be insured anymore?
The answer is yes. We should be encouraging them to pay for insurance, but you're raising another issue with regard to the fact that they're illegal. And so we've got to rectify the illegal immigration issue. But the answer is yes. They should be. We should be asking them to pay for insurance if they're taking our medical care.
But they're not eligible under Obamacare. Does that mean you think they should be eligible under Obamacare to buy the health insurance that's subsidized by the U.S. government?
No, not subsidized. I don't believe that we should have the Obamacare subsidized by the federal government.
Okay, here we go to Chris in the 10th District. You're on with Tom Roeser, WLS.
Hi, I'm a small business owner in the 10th District, and I had a question for Bob. And I just want to say the only reason why I'm asking this question is because Beth Colson, on all her signs, has the union label, and she's also got a lot of endorsements from unions. How do you feel about card check and mandatory arbitration on strikes, basically the Employee Free Choice Act?
I am against card check. I can't say that strongly enough, and I know that Beth Colson's been endorsed in recent campaigns by the SEIU / Acorn, and certainly they're not going to be endorsing me.
Comment? Jeff, no?
What else? So, Bob, how do you feel about the minimum wage? Some people have talked about the substantial unemployment that's caused by having the minimum wage above the market wage. Would you consider, given the state of the economy and the high unemployment, that we should actually lower the federal minimum wage?
Well, I think we have to do I think the federal government in general needs to get out of the way, take regulation off. Certainly lowering the minimum wage. I know in my business, I can't hire anybody at the minimum wage, but certainly I know that if we lower the minimum wage, more people will go back to work.
Let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
And it is the transportation safety people are talking about collective bargaining, and the president, when he was a senator, said that he would favor it. Do you? The people who guard our safety, should they be unionized?
TSA.
Should TSA be unionized?
Yeah.
I think that the unions serve a purpose. They used to. I don't believe that they need to be unionized right now.
Jeff?
Do you think TSA is working, or should we figure out other ways to maybe provide better security than through the current system of TSA?
Well, I certainly think that we would all like to have better security. Certainly the recent issue that just came down on Christmas Day highlights the fact that we've got issues with regard to air safety. And with regard to TSA, we don't know of a better system. I can tell you that I have heard about technology that they've been studying that has not been implemented. And that, to me, seems wrong.
John in Wheeling, you're on with Tom Roeser, WLS. Make it quick.
Hello, I'm a teacher. I teach economics at Wheeling High, and I read in the Daily Herald that Bob wants to suspend employer contribution to Social Security to all employees nationally, not just new hires. Wouldn't this bankrupt Social Security and the country within a matter of months without providing an incentive for hiring new employees?
Well, it does provide incentive for hiring new employees. And what we're talking about is we've got $787 billion out there in the stimulus package with 1% targeted towards small business. What we're trying to do is incent small business, put money back into the hands of those employers, those people that are creating jobs, so that they can invest in technology and equipment and materials to make our businesses grow. Not wait and try to get a grant from the federal government. We're talking about being able to invest and infuse capital into job creators' hands within 2 weeks. This is something that can be done. This is not ad infinitum. This is talking about a period of time to get people back on their feet and get people hiring. If we look at Washington today, entrepreneurs are not doing anything because they're afraid about what's coming out next from Washington. What's the second shoe that's going to drop?
Should we consider privatizing Social Security?
I think we need, well, in terms of my plan for Social Security, at least what I've talked about, we need to change Social Security if we're going to make it viable. And I think what we need to do is we need to go back in time, call the age maybe 55. Those 55 and older, we've made a promise to you. We must keep that promise. To those 54 and 364 days, I'm so sorry, we've got a different plan in order to make Social Security viable for the long haul. And
finally, should Lovey Smith go?
Yes, Lovey should go.
Unequivocally, yes.
Okay. I like him, but then what do I know? Okay. We will say bye-bye, and we will see you. Well, the engineer thinks he ought to go, too, by the way. Okay.
Tom, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, we're going to see you next Sunday. My name is Tom Roeser. Stay tuned for Bill Cunningham.